Hey everybody, so my name is Neha, and I'm one of the PMs on Minty Fresh, and we are going to get started on our sprint review. Savannah, could you move to the next slide? Thank you. So for today, basically what we're going to just go through is what is our problem space, how do we approach. I live in the city, I apologize. We're going to explain the approach, how did we get to where we're at, all the research that we did, how are we approaching guiding the users through our app. We'll do a little demo and then we'll talk about next steps. So our product, the name of our product is going to be called Empower. So Empower is a confidence building tool for the job seekers who are struggling with imposter syndrome. So effectively our problem space that we decided to focus on was imposter syndrome. So when we were working through and talking to each other, we spent a lot of time on the problem statement to really define what is our product vision. So the problem statement that we decided on was a career transitioner struggling with imposter syndrome needs to translate their skills and develop stories for interviews so they feel a more adequate and a better advocate for themselves during the job hunt. So this is like really defining what we're trying to do in this app. So how do we get there? So we chose our problem space. We started to share our findings with each other. We did a ton of user interviews, which we'll get into a little bit later. We did our experience map, and we were our own target users, right? So a lot of ourselves are career transitioners, so we were able to use that energy with our experience map. We also used the how might we tool to see like how do we think about this problem? How do we think about the fact that I don't know how did my skills from before transition into later? So that's kind of what we're trying to get into here. Then I think one of our designers came up with a great worst idea possible and activity, and that really cinched, okay, this is our idea for the MVP. So our MVP is we are going to be using our tool to help users by allowing them to develop their own person, right? Who they are. And then we're going to do a little gremlin character based on the responses to the initial onboarding prompts by labeling the imposter syndrome and weaknesses as the gremlin. So this is like a typical therapist tool that we kind of stole from. The weaknesses as a gremlin. Users are able to be more objective about what they need to work on and not tie their lack of experiences or skills with a lack of self-worth. Now I'll pass it to Leslie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie. I'm one of the designers for Minty Fresh. So as part of our research process, we interviewed 13 users, out of which 11 identified as an ethnic and/or gender minority. Our primary research pointed out that imposter syndrome was highly common among individuals who identify as minorities, so we intentionally wanted to be inclusive and representative of that in our findings. During this process, we also tested the screens on the slide just to narrow down our concept and make sure that users understood what we meant by, their own profile and the gremlin that was previously called the shadow self. Can you do the next slide, please? Awesome. So part of our research findings can be set into 3 different sections. The first one was how does it come up for users imposter syndrome? And we identified that for at least 5 of them, they question their own abilities and have self-doubt. And they're mostly triggered by situations like during interviews or after a rejection of an interview. Next, we learn how our users handle imposter syndrome right now. And the most common strategies that we found were fact-checking through reflection and tracking of your own skills and achievements, and also trying to reframe your own mental models and trying to find a new perspective on where you're at. And finally, our wireframe feedback was a mixed bag when it comes to like the shadow self, which would be the gremlin, because users wouldn't truly were a little bit confused as to what exactly it meant. So we needed a little bit more work on that one. Next slide, please. Here are some user quotes that we took from our interviews. They show how imposter syndrome shows up for them, or what they do specifically to tackle it by themselves. Next slide, please. And so how does Empower actually solve the problem? So one of the ways that we're trying to help our user is by providing a questionnaire that helps them reflect on the positive qualities that they have. Next, we're creating the gremlin that allows them to externalize that imposter and those like weaknesses that they might embody sometimes. Next, we have a personalized sample answer to the tell me about yourself question. These are a questionnaire that's basically different prompts that help you answer that question during an interview. And then finally, provide resources that help users create a game plan so they can track themselves how they're improving. And now to Savannah.
Hi everyone, I'm Savannah, a dev with Minty Fresh, along with Emily and Natalie. And with our product process, we started off with our user interviews, and then from there we went into our scope definition to be able to let us start developing. So for our feature roadmap, what we did in the past were our user interviews, and we defined the scope and set up the user flow of the app, which you just saw and Leslie explained. Our current is we're getting finalized designs, development working through sprints, and our user journey mapping. And in the future, we're going to follow up with more user interviews and the MVP developed. So in our next couple slides, we're going to show you both the desktop walkthrough and the mobile walkthrough. So our desktop walkthrough is currently in sprint right now, so we're just going to show you this little GIF of how it's going to look in the bigger scale. And then in our next slide, I'll show you how it's going to look in our mobile. So as you can see, we're stepping through each of the different pages to create our profile, and then it's going to tell you about your self-reflection in Gremlin. And then let's get into the mobile version. So in the mobile version, it's just a scaled down version of the desktop. So I'm going to swap over to our screen and give you a little walkthrough. So here's our onboarding screen to give you an idea of what this app is and how to get started. So as we walk through, we want you to start with the name. And it can be something as simple as Sasha Fierce, but this will be your name input into this app. In here, you'll input all of your answers to these questions to be later translated into your about yourself story in the end of the app. So as Leslie was saying, we wanted to focus more on specific questions for each page here. And as we step through, you can see they're all tailored to very specific prompts of the header.